So yeah, we're going to go over some helpful or hopefully helpful troubleshooting tips when going through Accudemia imports. All right, so just kind of running down the list of items. So we've recently had a few updates to Accudemia Data Exchange if you're not familiar. So, one of the first things that I would do is just check to make sure that you have an up-to-date version. I think the latest is 1.3.0.3. And for those to work, we recently updated to use .NET 4.8 frameworks. So that's something that you'd also have to have installed as a prerequisite. Um, and it's easy to check in the software. We're actually going to see that. Um, we're going to go over some of the other things involved as well. Some of the other things that could happen are typical errors that will happen maybe possibly on your local server as well as on our Accudemia side of things. So we're going to go through these items as well. And then finally, the most puzzling one is no errors, but incomplete uploads. So we're going to kind of look into that and see what could possibly be the issue if that happens. Okay, so getting started, the first one is, are you missing an update? So what I wanted to do, I'm going to provide a couple links, and I'm going to go back and grab this one. This this is actually the import documentation. I'm going to put that in the chat. Here we go. So if you're wanting a good place to get started, this is the link to kind of see the import documentation. What I also wanted to provide is a link on how to update the data exchange tool. So I'm going to paste that in as well. So that's the second link. And this actually goes through all of these different steps. So just, how you would actually go in there and check for updates. So you can go to help and then check for updates on the main menu of your Accudemia Data Exchange. And like I said, it is 1.3.0.3, should be the latest. And you always want to back up your configurations of all the import jobs that you have before running the update, just to ensure that you can restore those if it is needed. So if you follow that second link, it actually go through all those steps that's involved in the process. It's pretty much you'd be uninstalling any previous versions and then installing the latest updates. And that's really only with the latest 2 updates. Normally you don't have to go through that much. Usually you can just check for updates. It'll automatically pull whatever it needs, and then you can move on. But because of these major updates, this is why I wanted to include that. Oh, forgot about that. Okay, so next is the typical errors that you might encounter on your server. So a lot of times what we'll notice, like when we're having meetings with clients and everything, is that some of these are pretty simple, like we can't access the file itself or the file location. So some of the things to watch out for is, like, for instance, if let's say I have a batch file that's running an export from PeopleSoft, Banner, or one of the other student information systems out there. I want to schedule my import to go, at least a half hour or so after that set to go out, so it has plenty of time to write to the file. So if, like, one application is still using that file, we're not going to be able to pick up and use that file to upload to Accudemia. So you definitely want to space those out. Another thing is if the location is changed where that export from that other system is being dropped off at, we have to be made aware of that. So you might have to go in and update that import job to the new location where that's being placed. It could also be if you don't have administrative access to that. Let's say it's on a network share and the user that was running the import jobs doesn't have access to that network share any longer. So we've seen issues where they just need to be given permission to access that drive. Um, And then the last thing would probably be to check to see if your Accudemia password needed to be reset. And that's because when you log into the ADX tool, even though it's installed locally on your Windows computer, you're actually logging in to Accudemia. The first screen that pops up is going to be a sign-in screen, and that's actually going to use your Accudemia username and password. So sometimes it's the case where you just need to update that. Some other things too that I didn't really have a checkbox there, but would be if the headings in the file have changed, you always want to go and edit the job and make sure that they are all mapped, because if you change the name of the heading, it can throw that off as well. Okay, now these are moving on to typical errors that you might find when the import leaves your server fine, everything's going good, and then you get an email saying, hey, it failed to upload. And it'll try several times before it fails, sometimes, and try to move on from there. But um, typically it's going to be one of two things. Either it's going to fail to create your new classes for the semester, or maybe fail to create new students. And those are actually relatively easy things. So if you don't have the semester already existing, or you're not including that information in the import, that could be the issue. So a lot of times I'll actually say just to include the semester along with all the other data. So when you're building those new classes or courses for that semester, it just automatically is populated from the import. And then you don't have to have, an admin in the software actually creating those semesters every term. So, that'll fix that. Also, the other one is on creating new students. So every account has a license limit. If you're a small center account, you'll probably be more aware of it than if you're a larger institution, because every license has a limit. I think our small center accounts have like a 5,000 student limit. And so if you happen to go over that, maybe you haven't been inactivating the students every import, so that you have a lot of old students in there. Um, that would actually fix a lot of those issues with going over the license. And then in other cases, it might just be that your numbers have grown and you need to, work with the sales team on, getting a updated license. So, but a lot of times we can fix it with a checkbox, and I'll open up the software. We can see where you can inactivate the students. All right. So this is the hardest one, and it comes in all different forms, so I didn't know how to explain it maybe all the way, but uh, it's when you have no errors, everything seems to go, your server's happy with it, our server's happy with it, imports go through, but you're looking at the data in Accudemia and you're like, something's off. I'm not seeing either maybe a CRN number, maybe the section numbers aren't putting in or getting put in there, and they're getting all lumped into one class. Um, and the reason why is there's certain fields that are key fields to kind of separate those out into unique instances. So if you see here in this example, I have section 1 and 2, they actually have different CRN numbers, but if they happen to have the same CRN number, which is like the key field, then those would get lumped into one giant class. So I've seen where on sometimes the imports something is off like that. So everything is, you're providing all the fields that it wants, in other words, but something is misconstrued in the data and it's going to lump those things together. So you might get like, 10 classes in one actual class if those numbers match. So it's just something to be careful or cautious of. The other thing is I've seen where we've had people, they upload in different files, like all the building blocks, I call it, but they don't tie them together. So they might have like a student import that uploads your students, a course import that creates the courses and the classes, and then maybe instructor imports, but they don't create those a relationship. So there's not a registration or enrollment or something like you're missing, those imports that actually would tie the student to the course, or tie the instructor to the course. Even tutor assignments, like some people manually do that because there's not that many tutors they have to work with, and others they might need to have it as an import because there's too many tutors to have to assign all the courses to. Uh, so I know the next slide is going to be uh, probably the end slide here. But before we go into questions, I just, or as we go into questions, if you can type those in the chat, I can go ahead and pull up my my Accudemia data exchange tool.
So while Nick's pulling that up, if anybody has any questions, you can, at this point, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put your question in the chat as well.
Oh, it opened on another window. Okay, so some of those things, this is actually kind of helpful too, is if you don't want to have to monitor this regularly, you could actually tell it to email you if the import jobs are failing on your server side. So we actually have this tools options, and you can actually get email notifications whether it fails on the file itself. So when we were talking about like the file issues, maybe it doesn't have access to it, uh, you would check this box and then just put in your email. And if you have multiple people that would want to get this, maybe there's like an IT manager that would want that as well. So I could just say on a new line, just go ahead and add them as well. And hit OK, and it's going to keep that. So if anytime it can't access the file or there's some kind of issue on your server, it's going to let you know and notify you. Now, when we were first opening this application, I don't know if you saw the login screen, but it looks something like this. Whoever this user is that's logging in here will also get notified if it fails on Accudemia's side. So that's automatic. You don't have to do anything with it, but you do actually have to have an email associated with whoever this user is. So if, for instance, I created the user in a hurry just to give them the ability to import my files and data, you want to make sure that they have an email associated so they know if those are failing. And we can even, let's say you never even were able to log into the app. You can update it from here if you go to version and check for updates. And it tells me I have the latest, so I'm good. And we also have the help check for updates here. Let's see, I think I have a question here.
Yep, from Amber. She had her hand raised, but she's put it in chat. She says, is the password the same as the one connected to the single sign-on, or do we need to create one?
That's a good question, and the answer is no. Unfortunately, this tool hasn't been adapted to work with single sign-on. So it is actually using the password that you have in Accudemia. And if that doesn't make any sense, what you can do is, I guess you wouldn't have access to this yet, but if you open up your Accudemia account, and let me just find one that I'm gonna go ahead and bring over kiosk, and we're gonna log in. So let's say I actually logged in through single sign-on and I'm inside my account here. So even though, we're using single sign-on for the website, and, that's the way we're getting access to the account, what I can do is still go up here to my name, click on account, and on the security tab, I can enter a password twice that I want to use for the ADX tool. And if it's not my account, let's say, it's an IT person, they're having trouble logging in, I can go to the list of users, so under administration user accounts, and search for only system users. And let's say it was this guy here that I set up for just doing imports. And I can go ahead and update their password directly here. So that tool does use actually not the single sign-on password, but one that's stored uh, within the website. And as soon as I update it here and hit save changes, that person's going to go and be able to log in.
Now, I have a question about that. We able to push a password reset link to them so that we don't have to know their password?
You can give them a temporary one, and then once they log in, they can click their name in the top and then change it from there.
Okay.
That's usually what I have them do, but yeah, there's not a link that says. The only thing that you could provide them with, thinking about that now, is on um, here. Let me just drag this over. So on the login page, there's a forgot password link, and you could copy that link address, like right-click copy, and send that to them. But and I think that will actually bypass the single sign-on too, so that they can do that. Let me just double check. I think that was the testing server. Hold on, let me log out of this other one. So I'm just gonna. Oh, but I don't have single sign-on. So you could test it and see if you get this to come up. And you're not logged in, like you can't be logged in to test it, but you could try a different browser where you're not logged in, and you copy this link and paste it in there. If this comes up, then this will let them receive like an email to update their password. And you can change this to if it's not like forgot your password up here, it says the last part of this text, you could say request, and then whatever text I put in here, it should update right here. And you can get rid of the question mark too. And it's really the same form, it just lets you change the text up here.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right, good, good, good. I just asked because I know some people are uncomfortable with setting passwords for others, even if it's temporary.
Right, right.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to see any of that stuff that I was talking about, but I don't know. I think mine would actually go through, so I couldn't. It's one of those things I can't really reproduce
Yeah.
unless that actually happens.
No, no, I think that gives us a good idea. And Amber, hopefully that answers your question. Did you have anything else, or are we taking questions at this time?
I'm good, yeah, unless there's
Okay.
questions. So
Yeah, so we'll give it a minute or so to see if anybody has questions on this specific topic before we open it up to general Q&A. And again,
um,
you can put a question in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself at this time.
one thing I do want to show everybody real quick. Let's see. Is if you're not sure, let's say you're just an admin, and I say just an admin, but like you're an admin and you're not really running the imports is what I mean. And you're curious as to like when the last time they've ran, or maybe you are running the imports and you want to just see if they're successful or not. So when you log in to your website, under administration, advanced, and import, there's this view server execution status. And this is like a complete list of all the recent imports. So if any of them had failed, you'd be able to see like the date and timestamp of when that failed. And if you click on it, you'll get more details, and it'll say like, oh, it's because the semester wasn't created or whatever at that time. So, um, that's just something that you can do. So that was under administration, advanced, import, and then the third button on the right, view execution details. And there's your list. And you can actually access that as well from uh, the data exchange tool too.
Okay.
It was on the other screen, but
Oh,
here we go. So under tools, the same menu item we were looking at before, view execution status is right there, and it'll jump you out to that page. All right, so that's all I got. You're good.
I'm sorry, you should have a big D end. All
Oh
right,
yeah,
any
sorry.
all right, any questions for Nick before we move on to general Q&A? Kayla, you can feel free to unmute yourself. I see your hand raised.
Yes, I have a quick question about the inactive versus active students in the import. You were talking about how students need to be made inactive to keep from that number being reached. Will doing the import, will it automatically identify which students are inactive, or is that something that needs to be manually done in between imports?
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah, so I'm just getting the application open back up. Okay, so when you have the tool open, and let's say this is the import that you're running regularly, what you'll do is you can go back and edit that job, and there's two sides of this, I guess. We have what's called student active is kind of a column that you can select from in here. And uh, basically what this would do is reactivate a student that maybe was like off for a semester. Um, and I don't have to use all these fields. Like if all I wanted to do was upload the students in this one, I could use the key fields, which are ID, first and last name. We definitely recommend, more than that, but um, at a minimum, I could at least put them in there and then activate them. And the thing is, the checkbox I was talking about, this would actually be right here, and this will inactivate students that are not part of the import file. So if they're no longer showing up on it, um, whether that might be they're just taking the semester off or they've left the school, that will go ahead and inactivate anyone that's not part of this import. Now you can't do that if you're importing like this subset and this subset of students. But if like it's a complete list of all your students, then you would be okay with using that option. And then that combined with the active flag, and this is really just like a true value. So if you put true or yes or the number one, that's going to reactivate them in case they come back after being off a semester, let's say. And so basically, if I were to use this, just my 18 students on the import would be active in the system. All the other students would get inactivated. But yeah, so it's really that import behavior. So you could have things like that too, like when you're troubleshooting an issue, because we have a lot of the import behaviors there. Um, like overwriting, like maybe you just see that all the classes keep adding and adding to the students' enrollment data. If you do an overwrite, it will actually account for add drop. So it'll drop the classes that are no longer showing up on the current import. And then you can go a step further and say drop anybody from any of the courses if they're no longer on the import. So, let's say they, were registered, but then they, stop showing up. This is going to remove all their enrollment then. So it's a little different. We're talking about enrollment here. Over here, we're talking about whether they're active or not. And an active student can't access the system and do things and interact. Whereas if you don't have enrollment, you still might be able to visit a center. Um, maybe financial aid doesn't require enrollment, to visit them, registrar, whatever it is. So it's a little different. But yeah, so those are some things to check out too when you're troubleshooting.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions about this topic? All right. So at this time, we're going to open up the floor to any general questions about Accudemia. So again, you can unmute your microphone or you can type in any questions you have in the chat box.
I have a question regarding online appointments.
Sure.
Is there a way to, when an online appointment is made and the emails get sent out, is there a way that we can edit what those emails say when they're sent out to students and tutors to let them know that the appointment has been made? Because we're having an issue with students not knowing to click the link to join. So we didn't know if there was a way to put like a note in there to remind students to click that link when it's time for their appointment.
I mean, you can change the email template to have the link in there as well. So like if you not just the link on the screen when they first sign in, but in the email itself, you can actually create a virtual link if it's a virtual service. So you can update the email template, and that could actually be included as part of the reminder. So instead of just referring them over to the login and saying click the join session, it's just a link that will bring them right to the login. They log in and then they're going to join the session. So here, let me find the link to the email templates real quick, and that will probably be your best bet is to update that. Okay, so there it is. So that's actually part of the quick start. Let me see if I can find the other. Okay, so this other one I think also has the code, the second link I'm putting in there, that you would use so that they do get the link to join the session directly from that reminder email. And if you ever need help, we can always schedule a session. Just email support@accudemia.com and we'll send a link usually that you can schedule a time to meet with us and go through the email.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, give another few seconds if anybody has any other questions. Amber?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So quick question going back to I guess the imports and stuff. So when it has the domain name, I think I saw on your screen, Nick, it had like my college. Is that congruent for everybody else? So like for me, is it my SRU or my was it CCD? I think I saw up there. For ends, like is that what goes into the domain area or is it something different?
Yeah, so it's just like the first part of your academia URL. So like, let's say I'm just making up a name, Midland Community College, and let's say we were MCC .academia.net. So you're just going to use that first part, like MCC would be. So it doesn't have to be. I just put my college as an example because uh, I don't have a real university, so it's just my demo account. But yeah, so normally it's going to be similar to like the domain in your email, um, unless somebody asks us to change it to something different. So
Okay, thank you.
mhm.